More than 99% of California's doctors are not on probation. We're here today because about 500 to 600 doctors in the state are on probation for serious offenses, and their patients don't know it. About 100 doctors are placed on probation for serious offenses such as sexual misconduct, substance abuse, gross negligence, or a felony conviction related to patient care. Yet current law does not require them to notify their patients. Physicians are already required to inform hospitals and malpractice insurers of their probation status. But their patients, the most important person in the healthcare continuum, have to seek out the information for themselves. Patients deserve to be notified prior to their visit if their physician is on probation for serious offenses, and that's what Senate Bill 1033 will do. Here are a few examples of doctors currently on probation that would be required to notify patients if this bill were in effect. Dr. Van Vu runs the California Pain Center in Huntington Beach. In recent years, 16 of his patients died from drug overdoses. 16 patients have died from drug overdoses. He was accused of gross negligence and placed on probation by the medical board after an exhaustive investigation. A neurologist was found to have allowed unlicensed medical assistants to routinely give patients narcotic painkillers through infusion pumps. In one case, a woman was sent home after receiving more than 4 times the proper dose. She was found dead the next morning. This doctor is currently serving 5 years of probation. A family practice doctor was found to be excessively prescribing controlled substances to patients, including one who received over 1,000 oxycodone tablets at one time. That's over 1,000 oxycodone tablets at one time. They also sold drugs for cash and provided free drugs to patients in exchange for sex. This doctor is currently serving 10 years probation. An orthopedic surgeon, while on probation for substance abuse and forging prescriptions for highly addictive drugs and fictitious patients, was caught using a prosthetic penis and bladder to circumvent urine testing as part of mandated drug testing. He is currently serving 5 years probation. A primary care physician was found to have ordered more than 4 million tablets of prescription painkillers containing hydrocodone over a 15-month period. But investigators from the Drug Enforcement Agency could account for only 167,000 of those tablets. She is currently serving 7 years probation. A cardiologist was found to have performed gross negligence in treating 4 people with heart disease, including 2 who died. He was cited for exposing a patient to extremely excessive radiation, failing to order appropriate follow-up tests, dictating a fictitious history and physical without seeing a patient, and dictating medical records weeks after patients died. He is currently serving 5 years probation. 82% of Americans think that patients deserve to know if their doctor is on probation for serious offenses. I agree, and so does the Los Angeles Times, San Jose Mercury News, and the San Francisco Chronicle. I urge my colleagues on the Senate Appropriations Committee to approve Senate Bill 1033. Wouldn't you want to know if your doctor was on probation for a serious offense? You know, it's interesting, as I was driving up this morning, and there was a billboard, a huge billboard, and it was paid for by one of the largest HMOs in California. And the sign on the billboard says, "Choose the doctor that fits." Well, how do you know if a doctor fits if you don't know the doctor? So I'd like to describe the posters we have this morning. These posters illustrate the patient notification requirements under the bill compared to what the doctor's lobbyists want us to see. You can see that it shows a summary of the cause of probation, probation status and description of terms, the website, and the phone number. Doctors' lobbyists are trying to withhold information from the patient, even though it's available online today that you can get it. It's public knowledge and public information. I'd now like to introduce Marianne O'Sullivan, the representative of Consumers Union Safe Patient Project. Marianne?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to speak for a few minutes, and then we're going to hear from Tina Manassian and Michelle Montserrat Ramos, whose lives were vastly impacted by physicians whose problems were not properly addressed, and who did these things happened to them without disclosure. They didn't know that these things were going on with their physicians. Senator Hill already mentioned the kinds of offenses that doctors will have committed to be required to disclose their probationary status, and the fact that they're already required to disclose that probationary status at the hospitals where they practice medicine and to the medical malpractice insurers. But the people with the most at stake, their own patients, are not required to be told. And I want to tell you about the research. There's published research, and there's also good data, medical board data, that shows that physicians who are on probation are more likely to reoffend than your ordinary physician who hasn't been disciplined. And I've got a case in point. Dr. Erwin Rosenfeld of Laguna Hills, he was first placed on probation for 5 years in 1999 after the Attorney General alleged that he had violated drug statutes by engaging in repeatedly, clearly excessive prescribing, was grossly negligent, engaged in repeated negligent acts, committed acts constituting incompetence, engaged in acts of dishonesty and corruption, made false statements, and engaged in sexual misconduct. He was granted 5 years of probation, and that probation was over in 2004. Then, in 2011, Dr. Rosenfeld was again placed on probation when the Attorney General alleged that he was grossly negligent, engaged in repeated negligent acts, violated state statutes regarding dangerous drugs and controlled substances, failed to maintain adequate and accurate records, and engaged in unprofessional conduct. The administrative law judge in that case found that Dr. Rosenfeld had committed extreme departures from the standard of care with respect to 4 patients. That probation would be over in December of this year. However, the Attorney General has brought new additional allegations against this physician, and much like the ones I just described. Finally, 10 days ago, the medical board sought an interim order of suspension against this physician, and there'll be a hearing in July. So during the nearly 10 years this physician was on probation repeatedly, his patients had no idea. There was no disclosure, no information given to them upon which they could have based an informed decision in making a choice about, yes, I want to see this physician, or no, I don't want to see this physician. So I want to say that California law already requires that this information be on the medical board and other websites. However, for this physician, for example, when you go to that website, there's 240 pages of dense legalese and just these long, lengthy documents that are probably impenetrable to most California patients. And frankly, most people don't know the medical board exists. Most Californians have no idea. And once they get there, that's what they face, is these long documents. So the language of the legislation wisely calls for the boards to create a summary describing just like this, what were the violations, what are the restrictions on this physician's practice, so patients can understand what they're up against when they get to that website. And I want to say, too, that this disclosure directly to patients is particularly important in the case of really the state's most vulnerable populations, those who have limited internet access. So communities of color and seniors, who are most likely to use the healthcare system, are also the population least likely to use the internet. So very important that they get this information that way. So we're here today to call on the legislature, the Senate Appropriations Committee in particular, to vote this bill out, and so that people are not unknowingly getting care where they may not otherwise have chosen. So I don't know who's going to speak next. Tina? Good. Tina Manassian.
Good morning. My name is Tina Manassian. I'm also with Consumers Union Safe Patient Project. I'm a survivor and a victim of medical harm caused by a doctor who was in a diversion program. His diversion was kept hidden from me and countless others. It was a secret program. Nearly 14 years after my botched surgery, I still suffer with excruciating pain, spitting sutures, gaping holes, disfigurement, and a mutilated body. I will be forever reminded of the harm this doctor caused me and how the Medical Board of California allowed him to destroy my body by not protecting me. I know many patients who were victims of the same physician while he was on probation and in diversion. In fact, some have died. Dr. Brian West operated on me while he was in a diversion program. This information was kept confidential from me and all other patients. Also confidential was his repeated failure of testing positive with alcohol and failing to follow the restrictions of his probation. He was able to convince the Medical Board of California to give him a second and a third chance, game the system, and harm patients. This was clearly a physician who had a chronic history of alcohol abuse who was allowed to operate on me and others. Had this information been available to us, some of these patients might not have died, and I wouldn't have been injured. His license was revoked 7 years after my surgery. SB1033 provides me and Californians the information we need to make an informed decision on who we want to treat us and not treat us. This bill will require the medical board to mandate physicians to inform their patients of their probationary status. We're not talking about minor violations. We're talking about doctors on probation with repeated acts of gross negligence, sexual misconduct, repeated acts of overprescribing controlled substances, drug or alcohol abuse, and felony convictions arising from or occurring during patient care or treatment. The Medical Board of California requires doctors on probation to inform the hospitals where they practice and the malpractice insurance companies, but not their patients. This is unbelievable and an outrage and a double standard. The paramount priority of the Medical Board is and should be to protect patients, protect consumers. We're talking about people's lives and health, and your family, my family, and all the families of California. The risk of not knowing this information can mean life or death. State law already requires the medical board to post on their website information about physicians on probation. Most consumers of California don't even know the medical board exists. I didn't know that in 2002. To find a doctor on probation on the medical board's website is nearly impossible. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Senate Bill 1033 would require that the medical board prepare and make available a standardized, plain language summary, like this one, that describes, among other things, the offenses that led to the physician's probation. Senate Bill 1033 requires that physicians disclose their probationary status directly to their patients. Is particularly important because not everyone has access to the internet, and some don't even use it. Like Mary Ann was saying, seniors. You and your loved ones need protection also. I'm urging the Senate Appropriation Committee to support this bill, and I urge all other Californians to support this bill. Thank you. It's Manasian. M as in Mary, I, N as in Nancy, and the word Asian, A-S-I-A-N, and it's pronounced Manasian. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Montserrat Ramos. I'm with Consumers Union Safe Patient Project. Why is this issue important to me? My fiance, Lloyd Montserrat, died following elective surgery at the hands of a doctor with a substance abuse problem. Lloyd was a political leader. Like you and I, he believed that he would be safe in a hospital and that our regulatory boards, whose mission it was to protect consumers, would regulate and monitor its doctors in order to protect us, not our doctors. Lloyd was a vote director for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, a director at NALEO, a chief of staff Los Angeles City Council member, a well-respected political consultant. Following his graduation from UCLA, Lloyd even organized nurses with SCIU Local 660. Before Lloyd entered the hospital, I checked Lloyd's doctor's profile on the medical board website. When I checked the medical board website, Lloyd's doctor's profile was clean. It gave me a false sense of security that I had done the right thing. In fact, Lloyd's doctor's background was far from clean. There were no arrests listed, and Lloyd's doctor had been arrested various times, including for felony possession of crack cocaine and prostitution. There were no malpractice judgments, and the medical board knew of 3, as a judgment was listed on his doctor's profile 6 months after Lloyd died. There was information that the medical board had knowledge of, but it was not available to Lloyd or I, and I believed it played a contributing factor in Lloyd's death at the age of 36. When a little-known confidential physician diversion program was abolished in 2007, substance-abusing doctors were moved to the probation program. Today, you will find a significant number of substance-abusing physicians who are on probation. Now, with the confidential diversion program abolished, the information about one's doctor's substance abuse problems can be found on the medical board website, if you know how to find it. You see, the medical board believes that the doctors on probation are safe to practice, and the doctor's lobbyists believe that you should find background information on your doctor on your own. I disagree, and I believe that most Californians would agree with me. You see, we aren't random cases. There are so many cases of substance-abusing doctors who are allowed to continue to practice without their patients having the right to know of their doctor's addictions. For example, a Sacramento ICU doctor showed up to work and treated patients while drunk. The impaired doctor was in charge of life or death decisions in the hospital, treating patients in intensive care while he was drunk. The medical board gave him 5 years probation. He was disciplined again 3 years later for harming patients. He continues to practice today. All of these issues directly impacts patient care. It would be something that you would want to know about your doctor before you put your life or the life of your loved ones in their hands. I am here to urge the Appropriations Committee to support SB1033, a bill that will give some of the most chronically ill Californians critical information on their doctor's background, allowing us to make the best possible decisions for our families, a bill that will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. That's, now you see the reality of some of these physicians who are on probation and the harm that has come to just a couple of examples here, but so many more in California. Happy to answer questions if anyone has any.
Were any of these doctors that you quoted in the press release, have they been charged with any criminal activity, or what's the status of some?
You know, the physicians that are on probation, at least, and you could help me, Marianne, if necessary on this, the physicians who are on probation, that is, they get due process within the system. They are accused by, or the charges are filed, and the prosecution is by the Attorney General's office within the medical board. And so this is not a criminal outside of the medical board. This is handled within the medical board based on their professional licensure and their ability to practice medicine. So that's not out in the criminal justice system.
It could be, I don't know if some of them may have
They may have-
criminal charges also, but they're on probation
From the medical
practicing now.
practice. Other questions? Very good. Thank you very much for coming this morning. Appreciate it. And thank you for sharing those painful stories again.